My parents thought our family portrait on graduation day would be perfect, a triumphant photo of two successful daughters and their proud family. What they didn't know was that I was about to burn that portrait to the ground, metaphorically speaking, in front of 5,000 people. They didn't know that when I walked up to that podium, diploma in hand, I wasn't just accepting a degree. I was about to deliver an invoice for 4 years of silence and struggle. Our family was a small solar system with 2 planets, and my sister was the one closest to the sun. Her name was Emily, and she was a supernova. She didn't just walk into a room, she burst into it, all bright smiles and effortless charisma. She was the kind of person who aced exams she barely studied for and made friends with anyone from the university chancellor to the campus groundskeeper. Our parents orbited her, basking in her light, convinced she was their masterpiece, their contribution to the world. Their dinner party conversations were essentially a highlight reel of Emily's latest accomplishments. And then there was me, Sarah. If Emily was a supernova, I was the quiet planet on the far edge of the system. I wasn't dim, but my light was my own. I was a reader, a thinker, an observer. I found my comfort in the steady silence of the library stacks, not the roar of a football stadium. My grades were excellent, a product of relentless, methodical work, but my achievements were always met with a gentle, almost distracted, "Oh, that's wonderful, honey," before the conversation would inevitably pivot back to Emily's debate team victory or the lead role she'd landed in the university play. I existed in the background, a supporting character in the grand production of my sister's life. I told myself I didn't mind. I told myself it was peaceful in the shadows. The line between our two worlds was drawn in permanent ink the year we both received acceptance letters from the same prestigious state university. For Emily, her acceptance was treated like a royal decree. A lavish dinner was thrown at the Oak Barrel Steakhouse, the kind of place with cloth napkins and waiters who call you ma'am. They debated the merits of her pursuing a business versus a law degree with the seriousness of Wall Street analysts. The check for her first semester's tuition was written that very night, a celebratory flourish of my father's pen. My own acceptance was handled differently. The conversation didn't happen over steak and wine. It happened on a Tuesday night in the kitchen while my dad was sorting through a stack of mail. He didn't even look up at first. "Sarah, your mother and I are incredibly proud of you," he said, and my stomach immediately tightened. That sentence was always the preamble to a difficult reality. "But we've been talking, and you've always been the resilient one. So independent. We think it's important for you to take ownership of this. It will be a powerful life lesson. It will build character." I just stood there, speechless, as he went back to his mail. Building character was their euphemism for "you're on your own." It meant that while Emily was picking out dorm furniture, I was in a stuffy high school guidance office, trying to understand the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized student loans. While she was joining clubs and attending welcome week mixers, I was filling out financial aid applications until my fingers were numb, praying for a grant that would cover the cost of my textbooks. My character building involved working 30 hours a week at a greasy campus diner, serving lukewarm coffee and flipping pancakes. My college experience smelled of bacon grease and industrial-grade cleaner. It was a frantic, desperate juggle of classes, work shifts, and the low-grade, constant hum of anxiety about how I was going to pay next month's rent on my tiny off-campus apartment. Occasionally, a $100 check would arrive in the mail from my parents around Christmas or my birthday. It was always tucked inside a card that said, "We're so proud of your hard work." The gesture felt less like help and more like a token payment to soothe their own guilt. It was just enough for them to feel like they were participating, but never enough to actually alleviate the pressure. Meanwhile, Emily blossomed. Unburdened by financial worries, she soared. She became the president of her sorority and interned at a top marketing firm. She would call me, her voice bubbling with excitement, to tell me about her spring break trip to Cabo San Lucas. I'd listen while on my 15-minute break, leaning against a dumpster behind the diner, trying to imagine what the ocean felt like. I'd scroll through her social media and see pictures of her at glamorous formals, wearing beautiful dresses I knew my parents had paid for, while I was carefully rationing my groceries to make them last until my next paycheck. Let me be perfectly clear. I loved my sister. I was genuinely happy for her success, but a quiet, bitter resentment had taken root in my heart. It wasn't just about the money or the trips or the clothes. It was about the message they sent me every single day, with every check they wrote for her and every platitude they offered me. Emily was their blue-chip investment. I was their speculative gamble. They had faith in her future. They simply had hope for mine. I wasn't just studying for a degree. I was fighting to prove my own value, to demonstrate that I, too, was worthy of their belief. And with every ramen noodle dinner, with every missed social event, with every hour spent worrying about debt, I felt like I was losing. By the time senior year arrived, the exhaustion and resentment had hardened into something else, a cold, steely resolve. I had made it. I had survived the sleepless nights cramming for exams after a double shift. I had navigated the bureaucratic nightmare of student aid. I had endured the quiet shame of being the poor sister. And I had earned the exact same degree as Emily, from the exact same institution, under 10 times the pressure. The quiet girl who found comfort in the shadows was gone. I had been forged in the fire of their neglect, and I had discovered a voice I never knew I possessed. I was going to use it. Graduation day was hot and sticky, a classic Midwestern summer morning. The atmosphere in the car on the way to the ceremony was a thick, cloying fog of forced cheerfulness. My parents were electric with excitement, talking nonstop about Emily's summa cum laude honors cord, and the reservations they had once again made at the Oak Barrel. They asked if I was excited, a fleeting, obligatory question, before their attention snapped back to Emily. I was an extra in the blockbuster film of their daughter's success. The feeling of invisibility intensified inside the cavernous, sweltering Coliseum. We were seated alphabetically by last name, but our majors put us in different sections, several rows apart. I found my parents in the stands and watched as they trained a pair of binoculars on Emily's section, waving with the uninhibited joy of lottery winners. When the announcer called her name, Emily Catherine Miller, summa cum laude, they shot to their feet. Their applause was a thunderclap in their section, my father letting out a whoop that echoed in the vast space. I watched him through the crowd, saw him pull a handkerchief from his pocket to wipe his eyes. A familiar, dull ache pulsed in my chest. A few minutes later, it was my turn. Sarah Elizabeth Miller. I heard a polite, scattered applause from my parents' section. They stood up, but the energy was gone. It was the kind of applause you give out of obligation, a gesture of politeness. As I walked across the stage, the weight of 4 years of being overlooked, of being the resilient one, settled on my shoulders. This moment, this pinnacle of my relentless effort, felt strangely empty, forever cheapened by their blatant, lifelong preference. The university president shook my hand, his smile practiced and impersonal, and handed me the empty diploma holder. And then I was at the podium. The path was clear. Stop for a photo, smile, and walk off. But as I stood there, looking out at the thousands of caps and gowns, and then up at my family in the stands, their smiles already fading as their attention drifted, the dam of my composure finally broke. The walls I had so carefully constructed over the years, the stoic facade of the strong one, simply disintegrated. I couldn't just walk away. I couldn't let them have this perfect, sanitized version of the day. I gripped the sides of the lectern to steady myself and leaned into the microphone. My voice, when it emerged, was clear and carried through the arena. "Thank you," I began, letting the words hang in the air. "It's an honor to be here today, sharing this moment with all of you." I paused, my eyes finding my parents. Their smiles were still there, but they were becoming brittle, confused. I know my parents are especially proud today. They're celebrating 2 daughters graduating from this wonderful university. But I've learned over the past 4 years that pride is a funny thing. It's not always distributed equally. A ripple of silence spread out from the stage. The low hum of chatter in the audience died. I could see my parents' faces clearly now. The color was draining from them. My mother's smile vanished, replaced by a mask of pure, horrified shock. Her hand went to her throat. Off to the side, I saw Emily, standing with her friends, her expression a kaleidoscope of confusion. "You see," I continued, a surge of adrenaline sharpening my focus. "My parents are big believers in rewarding achievement. That's why they paid for my sister Emily's education in full. They said she earned it, and I agree, she did. She worked incredibly hard." The silence in the Colosseum was now absolute. Every single person was listening. But I was told my path required something different. I was told I needed to build character. So I did. I built character by working 2, sometimes 3 jobs. I built it by taking on over $40,000 in student loan debt I'll be carrying for decades. I built it by sacrificing sleep, my health, and any semblance of the college experience you're supposed to have. I took a breath, my gaze locking with my father's. His face was ashen, his jaw set like concrete. "I love my sister more than anything, and I am bursting with pride for her today," I said, my voice shaking with a sudden wave of emotion. "But I need everyone in this building, especially my family, to understand something. I am not standing on this stage because it was easy. I am not here because my path was paved. I am here because I clawed my way here. This diploma," I said, holding up the leather-bound holder, "was not a gift. It was not an investment. It was a victory. I earned it." I placed the diploma holder on the lectern, turned, and walked off the stage without looking back. A beat of stunned silence followed, and then it started. A swell of applause from the student section to my left, a roar from the students to my right, growing and spreading until it was a wave of thunderous sound. It was a validation more powerful than any degree. The weight of my secret was gone, replaced by the terrifying, liberating weight of the truth. The drive home was a masterclass in weaponized silence. The reservations at the Oak Barrel were canceled with a single, sharp text from my mother. When we arrived at the house, my parents walked directly to their bedroom and closed the door. The soft click of the latch felt like a gavel falling. Emily stood in the hallway, looking at me, her face a storm of conflicting emotions: anger, betrayal, confusion. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but then just shook her head and disappeared into her own room, closing her door, too. The graduation party was officially over. For the next week, I was a phantom in my childhood home. We orbited each other in the kitchen and hallways, careful not to make eye contact. The easy, flowing conversation that had once been the soundtrack of their house was gone, replaced by the tense scrape of forks on plates and the low hum of the air conditioner. They were waiting for me to break, to apologize for the public humiliation, to take back my words and restore their perfect family image. But I had no apology to offer. I had spent my entire life swallowing my feelings for their comfort. I was done. The confrontation finally came, not in a shouting match, but in a low, controlled tone that was far more chilling. My mother summoned me to the living room. She sat perfectly upright on the floral sofa, her hands clasped in her lap. "We need to discuss your appalling behavior, Sarah," she said, her voice like ice. I sat in the armchair opposite her. What you did, she continued, was a selfish, cruel spectacle. You took a moment that should have been about family and celebration, and you twisted it into a platform for your own bitterness. You embarrassed us. You embarrassed your sister. Her words were like stones. Embarrassed you? I asked, my own voice dangerously quiet. I spent 4 years running on caffeine and anxiety while you and Dad were writing checks for Emily's sorority formals. I was drowning, and you threw me a book on character. How do you think that felt? That is not fair, she snapped, her perfect composure finally cracking. Emily, she needed that support. There is an immense amount of pressure on her to succeed. You've always been so capable, so self-sufficient. We never had to worry about you. And there it was. The core of the issue, polished and presented as a compliment. My strength wasn't a virtue they admired. It was an excuse they had used for years. Their belief in my independence wasn't about empowering me. It was about absolving themselves. They didn't see a strong daughter. They saw a low-maintenance one. You're right, I said, the bitter truth finally clear. You never worried about me. It was just easier that way. I stood up, the conversation feeling utterly pointless. I could not force her to see a reality she was so determined to deny. I'm done, I whispered, the words more for me than for her. I'm done trying to earn a prize that was never an option for me in the first place. I left her sitting there, a solitary figure in her silent, perfectly arranged living room. I was prepared for the fallout with my parents, but I was not prepared for Emily. She showed up a few days later at my now nearly empty apartment. I was packing the last of my things, ready to move to a new city for a new job. She used her own key, and her anger was a palpable force in the small room. How could you do that to them? She demanded, her voice trembling with rage. You stood up in front of all those people and made Mom and Dad look like villains. You ruined what was supposed to be our day. Our day was ruined a long time ago, I shot back, not looking up from the cardboard box I was taping shut. It was ruined the day they decided one of their daughters was worth a full ride, and the other was worth a life lesson. You have no idea, she shouted, and the sound was so raw, so filled with a deep, unfamiliar pain that it made me stop. I finally turned to face her. You think your life was so hard? You think you were the only one under pressure? Try being their investment. Try knowing that your entire value is measured by your grade point average. Do you know what it's like to get a call from Dad asking you to explain why you got an A- on a midterm instead of an A? You got to be free, Sarah. No one was tracking your every move. No one was auditing your choices. I never had the luxury of being good enough. I had to be perfect, because they were paying for perfection. Her words struck me with the force of a physical blow. She wasn't angry that I had embarrassed our parents. She was angry that I had shattered the illusion she had been forced to maintain. For 4 years, I had seen her life as a golden, carefree path. I never once considered the crushing, suffocating weight of the expectations that paved it. She wasn't the cherished golden child. She was the prized racehorse, running for their approval, terrified that one stumble would make her worthless. My fight had been to be seen. Hers had been for the right to be flawed. In that moment, I saw it. We were both casualties of the same broken family dynamic, just wounded in different ways. My scars were visible in my cheap clothes and the perpetual exhaustion under my eyes. Hers were internal, a constant, gnawing pressure to justify their favoritism, to be flawless enough to prove she was worth it. The anger in the room evaporated, leaving behind a profound, shared sorrow. I never knew, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I only saw the support you had. I never thought about what it cost you. Emily's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of her. And I never saw how hard you were working, she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. I thought you were okay with it. I thought you were just being you, the strong one. We stood there, in the middle of the boxes that represented my escape, two sisters finally seeing each other for the first time. The chasm that had separated us for so long hadn't disappeared, but for the first time, I saw a bridge. It was fragile, built from the wreckage of our shared pain, but it was there. We had a long road ahead of us. Our relationship with our parents might be irreparable, but as I looked at my sister, really looked at her, I knew I wasn't alone anymore. We were no longer the supernova and the distant planet, defined by our parents' light. We were just two women, standing in the rubble of our past, ready to figure out how to build something new for ourselves together.